Hello and welcome to the Sustainability Experts, bringing you practical advice on sustainable business. I'm your host, Vanessa Thompson, and in this episode, we have the renowned keynote speaker, author, and business strategist, Dorie Clark. Clark is named one of the top 50 business thinkers by Thinkers 50. She has been described by the New York Times as an expert in self-reinvention and has authored several books, as well as being faculty at Duke University. Her work has appeared in Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, Forbes, and the Wall Street Journal. Dorie, it's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Vanessa, it's great to see you again.
Well, I know I introduced you, but I'd love if you could also introduce yourself and talk about your journey. I know in your TED Talk, you talk about kind of being a journalist in 2001 and then learning that, entrepreneurship is kind of part of everyone's journey, whether you're running a business or whether you have a profession, building a brand and being entrepreneurial is so important. But how did you come to this? What is your journey?
Yeah, thank you. I started my business working for myself and doing a lot of work around marketing and consulting and personal branding in 2006, which is a while ago now. But most crucially for this conversation is the thing that I did immediately before that, which is that for 2 years, I was the executive director of the Massachusetts Bicycle Coalition. And so I spent a couple of years leading this, small but mighty organization that was really at the intersection of transportation, urban planning, and environmental policy.
Yeah,
So it was a really interesting learning experience for me, especially at that time, which was just sort of just as the wave was cresting
yeah,
around like Al Gore and An Inconvenient Truth and the
yeah,
sort of public mania around environmentalism that seemed always to wax and wane, but the work is so important, but the attention that is paid to it sometimes in the broader public kind of comes and goes. But the question is, how do you really keep the drumbeat going
yeah.
regardless of the external circumstances, and to really shape the narrative, both in terms of the bigger picture issues and also to shape the narrative at a personal level in terms of people who are working in environmental issues and sustainability. How do you make sure that the people around you and the people who might hire you are really aware of all that you bring to the table?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of, where your expertise comes in because you have to be so entrepreneurial. You have to bring this entirely new mindset to wherever you're working. And with sustainability, you have to change every single industry, whether you're a doctor or a lawyer or whatever profession you work in, you have to bring this entirely new mindset to the place that you work, whether you're running a business or whether you're working within a larger company. So that's kind of, where I want to ask you about, building a brand. How do you kind of start to think about how do you bring this new entrepreneurial mindset to your profession to one kind of create kind of more stability within kind of otherwise an unstable job market, unstable, economic conditions, but then also you're bringing this entirely new mindset of your values into the work that you do. So you have to be thinking about how can you, really kind of bring that entrepreneurial mindset to your new role. So kind of, I would love to just hear about what advice do you have on how to build that kind of credibility and influence in industries that may even be resistant to change.
Yeah, you're putting your finger on something really important, Vanessa, which is that, ultimately we might rightly feel that the world around us is very uncertain, very unstable. As we're having this conversation, there's political tumult, there's tariffs that may or may not happen, there's
Yeah,
disruptions, there's federal job cuts that could then get uncut and then that get
yeah,
recut. And so for a lot of people, it's like, what's going on, and you can feel very powerless. But the thing that I appreciate about the concept around personal branding is that it's really one of the few ways, honestly, that we can take back power in our career. Because if you have a strong reputation professionally, if the people around you or the people in your field know who you are, they respect what you do, you have something, some skill or some attribute that you're known for, that essentially means that you have career insurance, because whatever happens at your current job or your current employer, you always have a place to land, because there are always going to be people who say, well, if she opens up, I'm going to poach her because she's
yeah,
valuable. And so that's really the question. I actually just spent the weekend doing an executive ed program at Harvard, and I was speaking to a group of people who are in higher education, and it was interesting because I think this is true in every industry because there's always a cross section, but I think especially in more socially conscious professions, there's a feeling sometimes that even the term personal branding is like a little, it's a little distasteful, and you maybe look like you're trying too hard if you're talking about that or engaging it in some way. But I think what we have to understand is that this is not a kind of performative exercise about, oh, let me figure out what people want and then I will present that facade to them. It
Right.
is the opposite. It is
Mhm.
about understanding who we are and what we bring to the table, and then just making damn sure that other people understand it and appreciate that. And it just
Yeah.
involves a little bit of upfront strategy about saying, all right, well, what is the message that I want to get across? And what are a few things that I can do to stack the deck as best I can to make sure that other people get it?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I think that it's so important for us to make sure that we're our true authentic self in building that brand because that's when our real passion and talent's going to shine through. What is that kind of balance between, making sure that you're unique in the market and that you're bringing your unique values to the market, but that you're also listening to what the market needs as well too within that brand because that brand is kind of the intersection of what the market demands and then bringing something new to the market that the market may have never seen before. How do you kind of balance, listening to what needs are there in the market and also making sure that, you may be bringing something entirely new to the market hasn't seen and they'll realize they need later. So how do you kind of balance the dance between those two things?
Yeah, I think that's always the question. It's a good one. There's the Venn diagram, right? Like, what's the overlap? And the way that I think about it is a question of stewardship or how
Mhm.
we can act in other people's best interest, right? Because, this sort of classic example in personal branding, where people want to be obstreperous about it, is they're like, well, just because you like to crochet doesn't mean the world needs more crochet. It's like, okay, fine, right? But I think that most people who enjoy crocheting as a hobby, if they actually put on the hat of being a responsible steward, they would say, okay, I understand that if I was acting in the best interests of someone else, do they, let's even say they're short on funds, would I tell them to spend their last dollar buying my crochet? Probably not. Like, that's okay. This is maybe a want, not a need. But I
Yeah.
think that for all of us, if we're able to say, you know what, there's plenty of things we all do that are hobbies. But if the thing that I am doing is something that legitimately is in the other person's best interest, then I owe it both to myself and to them to help illuminate that for them. And I think that sustainability is the perfect example of that. This is not, somebody shoving our personal agenda down somebody's throat. This is
Right.
saying, oh, would you like to find a way that could save you money? Would you like to
Yeah.
find a way that could actually improve conditions for the stakeholders in your community? Would it be nice if you had to buy less of the goods that you're dependent on and maybe could get more use out of the ones you already have? And I think
Yeah.
that most rational people would say, well, actually, on balance, that sounds like a good idea. So, that's the Venn diagram right there is if we can legitimately act in the other person's best interest and know that what we are, quote unquote selling is a net benefit to them, then I think we're golden.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit on such an incredible insight there that there's this level of generosity in personal branding, which I think is something that might be missed when a lot of people think about building their own personal brand. It has to be in the other person's best interest. I really love that. And then of course there's kind of the next piece of it, which is also making sure that you can share that with the world and it be influential. And I know that, one of your books you talk about it's not necessarily being the best, but it's being the best known that you actually get that traction. So for sustainability professionals, do you have any advice in terms of how do you then share that with the world when you really think in a way that is generous in terms of really thinking about what the other person needs first? Then how do you kind of get seen?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different vehicles that we can use for this, but one quick framework that I've developed over time is what I call the recognized expert framework. Because I spent a lot of time really trying to figure out, like, well, how do there's a lot of noise out there. We all know
Yeah.
that. how do people actually get known for their ideas in the marketplace?
Yeah.
And so the recognized expert formula, and for anyone who's interested, I actually have a free self-assessment so that you can do it for yourself and understand where you're strong and where you're weaker. You can go to dorieclark.com/toolkit. But anyway, it's three components. It's content creation, network, and social proof. And
Okay.
I'll explain in a moment how these pieces fit together. But content creation is basically how are you sharing your ideas publicly? Because the people around you obviously might know that you're good, but
Right.
that word is never going to travel unless you create content in some form, whether it's speaking at a
Mhm.
conference or writing an article or doing a podcast, so that people can share it, so that strangers can know that you have good ideas. That's number
Mhm.
one, content creation. Number two, your network. You can be brilliant, right? But if you're sort of off in the cave, then
Right.
people are not going to hear about it. You need to be in
Yeah.
conversation and in community so that you can be
Mhm.
informed by that and so that others can amplify your message. And then finally, third and finally, is social proof, which is basically the question of how do you provide quick heuristics for people so that at a glance they can say, oh, this person is credible? Because there's a lot of not credible people out there. How do we make it easy? Because we know that they're busy. We know that they're not going to take a huge amount of time to figure it out. So basically, it's about your affiliations. And it could be your affiliations with other people in the field. Oh, these high profile people blurbed Vanessa's book, therefore she must be credible. Or it could
Yeah.
be organizations that you've consulted for. It could be
Mhm.
places you've worked. It could be the degrees or education that you have. It could be publications that you've been quoted in. There's a lot of options, but you do need to work on building that. So that's the recognized expert formula that can really help get ideas out into the public sphere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's such an important point too, because, even if you're not thinking of becoming a thought leader, sometimes getting one or two articles just in recognition of the work or research that you've done is so vital to showcase that you did that you actually were leading that project and to kind of solidify yourself that you actually worked on all the projects that you did. So even if you're not becoming a thought leader per se, it's actually so vital. And I feel now more than ever to make sure that you're in circles, that you're, being loud about what you're giving to the world.
That's
Um,
right. And I'll just to add to that, I think that's so important. Whatever the sort of sphere of your aspirations, I mean, I'm sort of speaking it like, hey, share them with the world. But even if you
yeah,
say, no, 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 I just want to be known in my organization. I just want people,
yeah,
inside my group to know that I'm good. Well, great. You know what? If you write something up in the company newsletter, in the organization newsletter, that becomes your evidence at the performance review that you
right.
deserve the bonus or that you deserve the
Yeah,
promotion. So it's even in an internal sense, these things
yeah,
work. Share your ideas at a lunch and learn. Raise your hand to present at the board meeting to talk about your initiative that you did. So that if it's like, hey, board, look, we're doing something good here. All of those things count a lot in terms of your career stability and in
yeah.
terms of your ability to keep doing what you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely resonate with that. Even times when I was a researcher and I was just doing research, just getting one article that was even in a non-academic paper published about the work we were doing actually became known around campus so that we could continue doing the same work, that we could actually just keep doing that same research. So it's absolutely so important to do. And that kind of leads me to my next question in the sense that there's a lot of ups and downs in that process, and that sometimes it takes a long time before you actually can reach and achieve your goal of actually being able to share this with the world. You can maybe work, maybe even 2 or 3 years, putting things in articles, going out and speaking, going to conferences, and only see the returns maybe, 4 years down the road. It depends, of course, on your goal and your ambition in that regard. But how do you kind of know that you're on the right track when you're, going through all these ups and downs? Maybe you're building your own business, maybe you're just trying to influence your company to have kind of a more values-driven approach with their sustainability. Whatever it happens to be, there's kind of ups and downs on that road. You can be doing the good work of creating a narrative, making sure that you share that with the world. But in that interim, before you see the results, how do you kind of find a way to know that you're on the right track?
Yeah, well, I have lots of thoughts about this, but actually, I want to sort of flip it back on you, Vanessa, because you've been working on this book project for several years now, right? Like, what?
Yeah.
how do you think about this? Because a book is always this kind of like, ultra long-term thing. Like you do not see
Yeah.
a quick return on that investment. So how has it
Yeah.
been for you?
That's a great question. The way that I've been doing it is I've actually been A/B testing some of the chapters and sections with people that I really respect. So I've actually been taking sections of the book, case studies from the book, and then sharing that with selective people that I really trust and saying, does this resonate with you, or is this something that I'm just geeking out on? Because when you're an author, you go down so many rabbit holes, it's really hard to know that you're actually being able to resonate with your audience, and it's not just something that you're personally interested in. So throughout this process, I've been continually pulling people in and reading different sections of the book, and it's helped enormously. Just a few tweaks here and there saying, you know what, this needs to be in a more narrative format. This is, reading too much like a textbook or something like that has been, some really helpful advice that's helped me get to the point of where I am now.
Yeah, that's great. I love that example. So I'll just add on to that. I think that's
Yeah.
wonderful. In my most recent book, The Long Game: How to Be a Long-Term Thinker in a Short-Term World, um, one of the things that I talk about is that honestly, the hardest part about achieving long-term goals is that because, for obvious reasons, there's usually a distance between the place where you start it and the place where it's achieved. Um,
Mm.
I like to call that the tunnel because you enter the tunnel at one end, and the problem is that you don't know how long the tunnel is. That's really the challenge. I mean,
Yeah.
for certain things, it's like, okay, well, I entered a master's program, so it's hard work, but I know it's going to end in 2 years, and I'll get a degree unless I totally screw something up.
Yeah.
But for a lot of other initiatives, especially things that haven't been done before, I'm launching a project, or I'm launching an initiative, or I'm trying to do a thing. You don't know how long it's going to take. And it could take 3 months, it could take 18 months, it could take 3 years. And so there's this black box of faith that you're kind of entering, which is really stressful. And so the big question the whole time you're in that tunnel is it not working, or is it not working yet? And that is
Mm.
the world's most stressful and vexing question because no one
Right.
wants to be the idiot holding on too long to something that isn't going to fly. And so
Right.
that's why one of the concepts that I like to talk about is what I call looking for the raindrops, because
Mm.
ultimately, what we tend to look for, sort of the goal always is like the big success at the end. It's like the thunderstorm. It's like nobody can miss it. It's loud. There's lights. It's all that. But ultimately, as you're getting closer and closer, in order to maintain the faith that you need to keep moving forward, you need to look for the raindrops because a thunderstorm does not emerge out of nowhere. You don't go from sunny skies to a thunderstorm. It's the wind changes, the sky
Mm.
gets dark, you feel some raindrops come in, the barometric pressure is different, and you need to start looking for those subtle signals and identify them in advance. Like, if it
Mm.
were working, what would it look like? What would be
Mm.
the earliest indicators? And when you identify that and begin to look very carefully for that, that's how you can begin to tell if you're gaining the traction that you need.
Absolutely. Almost kind of like minimum viable product in the sense that you're just trying to see, is this useful to certain people? Are we starting to see kind of some feedback? I like that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I also wanted to mention one other piece that's actually true for one of your other books, which is Reinventing You. You talk also about kind of shaping a personal narrative as well too. And I think that's kind of a step back from what we're talking about here. But in terms of building that narrative, in terms of what would be that minimum viable product for your personal brand, that would be really important to kind of understanding how you're actually going to be able to share that with the world. How can you think, sustainability experts or people who are really interested in creating impact with that personal brand start to kind of refine their story as they start to build that personal brand?
Yeah. So, as we're talking about, minimum viable products with regard to brand, and you're exactly right. I do talk about that in Reinventing You. One of the strategies that I suggest for kind of a back of the envelope version, because sometimes people think, oh, personal brand, it's so involved, it's so complicated. Oh my God, I have to make a logo. And it's like, no, you don't have to make a logo. It's really okay. But one exercise that I like to suggest which is super fast and easy and kind of fun, is called the 3 word exercise. And so
Hmm.
basically, you just survey, I like to say about a half dozen people because it's small enough to be manageable, but it's not, it's enough people so that you can get different data points. But, give or take, about a half dozen people, and you reach out to them. You could call them, you could text them, you could do it on social media. The medium doesn't really matter. But you say, hey, I'm doing this quick exercise. Can you describe me in only 3 words? And
Hmm.
that's actually really useful because what it is going to tell you, I mean, some people say, well, I don't think it'll tell me anything I don't already know. That's fine. It doesn't need to tell you something you don't know. What it is it's about gradations and emphasis. Because if you have 6 people and they all are clustering around a certain set of words, that's actually incredibly interesting and powerful because you the problem with most of us is that it's not that we don't know who we are. I mean, we can argue that in an existential sense, but in general, like if you're an extrovert, you understand you're an extrovert. The problem is that we know too much about ourselves, and
Hmm.
therefore we can't see the forest for the trees. And we don't understand which of our traits are most prominent to other people. But when you
Yeah.
do the 3 word exercise, it helps you understand what is it that other people see at a glance. And that
Hmm.
becomes the breadcrumbs that you can follow so that you can understand, oh, okay, I apparently seem much more extroverted than other people, or I seem much more creative than other people. And that's where you can begin to get a competitive advantage in terms of your brand. And you can start to think, well, how could I leverage that? Like, what are some things that I could do that could really take advantage of that? Like, oh, if I want to lead innovation initiatives at my company, being seen as creative is actually probably a really good thing for that. So maybe I
Yeah.
can lean into that more.
Yeah, absolutely. In a way, that's also kind of raindrops in a sense as well, too, to understanding who you are and what your personal brand is and what also resonated with other people as well, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that people are going to be really curious. Of course, they're now going to want to read, all your books if they haven't already, but also to look at your, coursework and things like that. Where can people find you online, learn about your work, and be supportive of, all of the information that you bring to the world?
Yeah, thank you so much, Vanessa. The central hub is DorieClark.com. I have more than 700 free articles on the website that I've written for places like Harvard Business Review and Entrepreneur, Fast Company, etc. So that's a good place to start. And for people who are interested, in particular, in the Recognize Expert formula and trying to understand, it's about a 10 to 15 minute quiz that you can take to really help you work through where are you strong, where do you need to bolster things in terms of your own ability to get your ideas heard. Again, you can download that for free at dorieclark.com/toolkit.
Wonderful. Thank you. And for anyone who's in the audience, some of them are entrepreneurs, some of them are working with in corporations. Do you have any last advice in just in terms of how they can build their own personal brand and craft a story that, brings in their values of sustainability into their journey over this next year or few years?
Yeah, well, I think that my big piece of advice, in particular, the part of the recognized expert formula that often feels most stressful to people who haven't done it is the idea of content creation. It sounds maybe formal or intimidating. Oh my
Yeah.
God, I can't write an academic paper or something like that. And the truth is, you do not have to do that.
Mm.
There's a lot of ways of sharing your ideas and speaking up. And it could literally just be starting the process of anytime somebody says to you, oh, hey, that's really interesting, or wow, I haven't heard that before, or, oh, that's such a good idea, just start writing it down. Just like make a list in the notes app of your phone, and
Mm.
you can start to begin to create a kind of document. So it's like, oh, actually, I guess I
Yeah.
do have some unique ideas, or I do have something to share that maybe people haven't heard before. And if you begin to create a document like that, it can actually become much easier when you feel ready to make the leap into doing that first LinkedIn post or writing that article for your organization's newsletter.
Absolutely. I love that. Breaking it down into those baby steps so it becomes achievable because this is so important. But yes, you're right. It can be so overwhelming at first. So I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Sustainability Experts. Your insights were a huge gift and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. You too.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sustainability Experts. If you liked the insights from our podcast, feel free to reach out to us on our website.
We produce episodes with world-class executives every month and offer exclusive consulting and speaking services globally. Reach out to us and become a leader in your industry.